welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I'm your host, Louis Padian. I hope that you're doing well and are enjoying the podcast and the topics we've covered so far. These podcasts are released every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to be kept up to date.
Today we will be covering the gluten-free diet, and most likely if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me mention gluten-free, or you've probably seen it around and probably curious around what it actually is, what it entails, if it's a diet for you, if there's any proposed health benefits associated with it. And it's a massive topic, trend and lifestyle that people undertake. When I was doing a bit of research into this, there's some really fascinating statistics. So global trends actually suggest that it's going to be worth, the gluten-free market is going to be worth $14 billion by 2027. 23% of global consumers believe that gluten-free products are healthier, and actually 30% of individuals following a gluten-free diet did not have a diagnosed medical reason for doing so. So it's a really popular trend, and the prevalence actually with regards to the diseases associated with gluten-free, which we will be talking around non-celiac gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, the prevalence is pretty small considering those staggering statistics. So in the UK, around 1.4% of the UK adults have celiac disease, which they reckon actually 80% of cases still remain undiagnosed, and around 10% of the UK population avoids gluten for some reason. So the reasons cited were 42% of this research survey, 42% cited digestive health concerns, 27% believed it was healthy, and 19% actually followed it just because a family member was eating a gluten-free diet. So with all those really interesting, intriguing statistics, what actually is gluten? So gluten is a protein. So we've spoken about proteins before, but there's lots of variations of protein, and gluten is one of them. And it's found in wheat, barley, rye, and bran. And it's one of the things that gives bread or things that contain gluten the elasticity or the rise. And that's often something that if you see a gluten-free product, often they don't have that elasticity and rise in them when we're looking at cakes and breads and things. So that's what gluten is, and I've mentioned around the two diseases associated with it. So we've got celiac disease, which is a autoimmune disorder which triggers an autoimmune response when someone eats gluten, and it's basically the body attacking itself. So it sees it as a threat and actually causes it to attack the tissues, damaging the small intestines in particular, and actually really limiting the amount of nutrients that can get absorbed, and basically cause a huge amount of inflammation there. Like we said, there's around 1% to 1.5%, depending on where you're looking. And symptoms can vary widely for people, from digestive discomfort, like bloating, diarrhea, fatigue, weight loss, anemia, and often early diagnosis and a strict gluten-free diet are crucial for managing celiac disease and preventing long-term complications. There are lots of poorer health outcomes associated with celiac disease. Obviously, with that lack of absorption in the gut, that can cause sort of nutrient deficiencies, but also there's potentially higher risk of, with most sort of illnesses that prescribe a certain diet where you've got to restrict foods, there's a higher instance of disordered eating and eating disorders within those groups, and potentially a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular events as well. So that's celiac disease. Gluten sensitivity, or non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which you might see as NCGS, is a condition where individuals experience things like similar to the celiac disease, where it's discomfort like bloating, diarrhea, fatigue when they consume gluten, but it isn't as severe. It's not the body attacking itself, it's just a sensitivity, and it doesn't have that immune response that celiac disease has, and they both can be tested for. And again, if you're unsure, you feel that this might be applicable to you, please reach out to your healthcare practitioner and see if you can get tested for it as well. The prevalence of non-celiac gluten sensitivity isn't really clear, and that's because it's more of a newer sort of condition that used to be either celiac or non-celiac, but actually there's this sort of grey area in between where people might have a sensitivity to it, and the values that people, or the population statistics, are around 0.5%, so really small, to 13%, which could be massive. So again, it isn't quite clear how prevalent this is for people. So It really came about in the 1950s with when they first identified celiac disease, and in recent years it's sort of come a more popular dietary trend with various of what is unclear, unfounded, unsubstantiated reasons that people might do gluten-free diets. It's really popular in lots of health-focused industries or regions. Sort of when we're looking at Australia's really hot on it. You might see it in places in London or in LA where it's quite a trendy thing to do. And it's unclear of sort of health benefits associated if you don't have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity, but there's no actual strong evidence to support any of the claims that people might talk around it. So they might say that it's helped with their weight loss. Actually, that might just be because they've eaten better and they've reduced the amount of processed foods in their diet. They might have just been having more of a keen eye on their diet, increase their fruits and vegetables, those sorts of things. So often it's more anecdotal feedback from people. If they've tried gluten-free, they go, oh, I feel much better on it. It's if they haven't got the condition, then some of that might just be a placebo effect. It might just be that actually they're just focusing on more quality nutrition. So what does it look like in practice? So a gluten-free diet in particular. So for those of you who don't know, I eat a gluten-free diet. I fall probably more on the non-celiac gluten sensitivity rather than the celiac disease. I wasn't formally diagnosed, so the process I went through is I was complaining about loads of issues, digestive issues, skin conditions, and the doctor, well, this was before I studied nutrition, sort of pinned me up and said, have you tried going gluten-free? I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. Went on it, felt huge better, my skin cleared up, and I went back and said, well, I'd like to actually get tested so I actually know that it definitely is that. And she said, well, if you want to reintroduce gluten back into your diet, then you can do the test, but because it's not in your diet anymore, the blood test probably won't show the inflammation markers that they're looking for. So I said, well, I'm not really willing because the way I was feeling before to where I was feeling after was miles different. Like I said, my skin used to be red raw all the time on my face. And basically, I just said, well, it's good enough for me that I'm feeling a lot better. My skin's a lot better. Bloating was down. I wasn't as fatigued. Digestive issues were a lot better. Recovery from training, things like that. I had some really freakish injuries before this as well that are quite obscure. Don't know if that's related, but at the time I thought it might have been. But anyway, so the process is that I went through this process and actually had to really learn on the fly how to cut gluten out from my diet. So foods that commonly contain gluten would be wheat-based products. So you're looking at your bread, your pastas, your cereals. You've got barley, which is usually added to food, rye, which again can be in the form of bread, but added to foods as well. And some processed foods like sauces may contain it. Ones are like brown sauce commonly does, soy sauce. You might have it in some barbecues, things like that. It's quite a rich one. Jerk sauce can have it as well. So, considering at the time I was eating probably a lot of these products and felt awful, cutting a lot of them out of my diet, I felt a lot better for it. So, things that I had to include or increase in my diet would be probably having more whole foods, such as fruits and vegetables, lean protein sources, which I was having a lot of the time, legumes, which I probably wasn't having as much of, but I've started to include a lot more of. Then often people think that, well, you can't have bread, you can't have pasta. What do you have? And quinoa, rice, oats. Again, oats is a bit of a grey area because, as far as I know, and this is my understanding of it, you get oats and you get gluten-free oats. Oats are naturally gluten-free, however, they are transported in the same containers as wheat. So a lot of them will have traces of wheat. So in order to be gluten-free certified, oats are transported in their own separate container, which has been thoroughly cleaned and all those sorts of things. And again, with anything that's certified gluten-free, I think it has to be less than 5 parts per million of gluten. So technically, gluten-free foods aren't completely free of gluten, or ones that have been made gluten-free, such as gluten-free bread or gluten-free cereal, but they will have such a low marker that it reaches that level of being marked gluten-free. Following a gluten-free diet requires.
So there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, please do. I am at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all other social media platforms. If you're looking for support in achieving your goals and living a healthier, happier, and more balanced life in the process, click the link below and inquire about working with me. Remember to subscribe to the Balanced Approach podcast wherever you're listening for more insightful episodes, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.